You know, sometimes, life throws you a curveball so hard, it shatters everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world. This isn't just a story. It's my life, a bitter testament to how far a man can fall and how much further he'll go to claw his way back. The day Valerius Finch finally got what was coming to him. Every fiber of my being hummed with a satisfaction so profound, it bordered on spiritual. He'd tried to erase me, to turn my life's work into a footnote in his own rapacious history. But he underestimated the quiet fury of a man left with nothing but his name to reclaim. For years, I had walked a shadow, but now, at 67, the shadows were my hunting ground, and Finch was about to step into my trap. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. My name is Silas Croft, and for nearly 40 years, the name Croft meant something in the manufacturing heart of Seattle. Not in the flashy tech world, not in the towering glass edifices that sprung up like weeds, but in the honest, tangible world of precision engineering. Croft Son Engineering wasn't just a business, it was a legacy. My father, a man whose hands bore the permanent grease and scars of a lifetime spent coaxing metal into form, had started it in a drafty warehouse down by the Puget Sound. He taught me that integrity wasn't just a word you slapped on a mission statement. It was the unseen component in every gear, every circuit. Every meticulously crafted part we sent out into the world. We specialized. We didn't churn out cheap, mass-produced junk. We built the bespoke components, the custom-engineered marvels that other companies couldn't, or wouldn't, touch. Think parts for deep-sea submersibles, the intricate mechanisms for specialized medical equipment, or the robust chassis for cutting-edge robotics. Our clients weren't just customers. They were partners who trusted us with their vision. We built a reputation for meticulous quality, unwavering reliability, and an ethical backbone that was as strong as the steel we shaped. Our employees, many of them with us for decades, weren't just names on a payroll. They were family. We had cookouts by the Sound every summer, celebrated their kids' graduations, mourned their losses. That business, that community, was my lifeblood. I was 58 when Valerius Finch first walked into my office. It was a drizzly Seattle autumn, the kind that settles deep into your bones. And the broader economy was experiencing one of its periodic shivers. Nothing catastrophic for us, but enough to make the future feel a little less certain than usual. Finch, however, was a ray of artificial sunshine. He was all sleek Italian suits and polished Oxford shoes, with a smile that could charm the rain right out of the sky. His eyes, though I remembered those eyes, they were a startling pale blue, almost translucent, and they held an unsettling stillness, like a predator sizing up its prey. I dismissed it as professional intensity at the time, a costly mistake. He introduced himself as a strategic investment partner from a firm based out of New York, though he claimed to be looking to expand into the Pacific Northwest. He spoke of innovation, of market capitalization, of scaling up Croft Son Engineering to reach its true global potential. My father's old office, with its worn wooden desk and shelves overflowing with engineering manuals, seemed to shrink under the weight of his grand pronouncements. He complimented our craftsmanship, our reputation, saying he saw untapped genius in our operations. He laid out dazzling projections, spoke of new technologies, and a future where Croft Son wasn't just a regional gem, but a world-renowned leader. I was cautious. Naturally, Croft Son was profitable, stable, and debt-free. We didn't need an investor. But Finch was persuasive. He talked about securing the future, about legacy beyond my own lifetime, about creating even more opportunities for my loyal employees. He understood my values, or at least he pretended to. He even went so far as to offer to set up an employee stock option program, something I'd always dreamed of but never quite figured out how to implement without sacrificing control. He seemed to genuinely care, to understand the soul of the business, not just its balance sheet. He was a master of the veneer, and I, a simple engineer who believed in the good in people, was completely taken in. We started with a small, non-controlling investment. Finch brought in a team of consultants, slick, young men and women, who spoke a language of buzzwords and algorithms. They started optimizing processes, streamlining supply chains, and refactoring our internal structures. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the core of Croft Son began to shift. Decisions that once would have involved discussions with my lead engineers and floor managers were now being made in hushed meetings with Finch's people, based on data points and projected ROI. My old friend, Harold, who'd been our head of procurement for 30 years, found himself sidelined. His decades of relationships with suppliers replaced by automated bidding systems. The new efficiency was undeniable, but a coldness crept into the warmth of our old factory floor. Finch became a fixture. Charming clients, schmoozing local politicians, always impeccably turned out, always with that unsettlingly still gaze. He gained access to everything: our proprietary schematics, our client lists, our most sensitive financial data. He suggested taking on more ambitious high-risk contracts, pushing our production capacity to the absolute limit. He argued it was necessary for growth, for proving our global potential. I hesitated, citing our commitment to quality over quantity, but he painted me as old-fashioned, resistant to progress, holding the company back. He even started subtly undermining my authority, planting seeds of doubt among the board members, some of whom were newer additions he'd helped bring in. Silas is a craftsman, I overheard him tell one of them once. A brilliant artist, but sometimes, a business needs a visionary, not just an artisan. The true betrayal started small, with a series of aggressive leveraged buyouts of smaller, struggling competitors that Finch pushed through. These acquisitions drained our capital, stretched our resources thin, and created a web of complex financial instruments that I, with my focus on engineering, struggled to fully comprehend. Finch assured me it was all part of the synergy, creating a more robust, diversified portfolio. Then, the market took an unexpected downturn, not just a shiver this time, but a full-blown economic flu. Those leveraged companies began to bleed money, and suddenly, Croft Son, once financially impregnable, found itself teetering on the edge. That's when Finch struck. He used the financial instability he himself had orchestrated to paint a picture of my catastrophic mismanagement. He presented fabricated reports to the board, doctored financials, manipulated projections, even whispers of unethical practices in my past that simply weren't true. He manufactured a crisis, then presented himself as the only solution, the white knight who could save the company from my incompetence and antiquated leadership. The board, now packed with Finch's hand-picked allies and terrified by the looming financial disaster, voted me out. It was swift, brutal, and humiliating. I stood there, in the very boardroom where my father and I had celebrated so many successes, watching as the life I had built was ripped from my hands. My employees, the people I considered family, looked on with a mixture of confusion and fear. Finch, with that placid, almost sympathetic smile, offered me a generous severance package on the condition I signed a non-disclosure agreement and agreed to never speak ill of Croft & Son or his firm. Again, he was sealing my lips, burying my truth. I refused the blood money. I couldn't. How could I take his tainted cash when he'd stolen my legacy? I tried to fight back. To expose him, I called lawyers, contacted journalists, even reached out to old industry friends. But Finch had covered his tracks meticulously. The legal documents were ironclad, the financial maneuvers perfectly legal, if morally bankrupt. His public relations team launched a vicious smear campaign, painting me as an erratic, senile old man who had driven a once great company into the ground, only to be saved by the brilliant foresight of Valerius Finch. The local news, hungry for a scandal, ate it up. My name, once synonymous with integrity, became a cautionary tale of outdated leadership and disastrous management. I lost everything: my business, my reputation, my standing in the community. My home, a modest craftsman by Lake Union that had been in my family for generations, was mortgaged to pay legal fees, then eventually sold off to cover the remaining debts Finch had strategically piled onto me. I became a pariah. Old friends avoided my calls. Former colleagues looked away when they saw me on the street. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, stealing my breath. I felt like a ghost haunting the city that had once been my home, so I left. I retreated. I sold the last few possessions I had, and bought a small, isolated cabin tucked away in the Olympic Peninsula, deep in the rainforests of Washington, a place where the only sounds were the whispering pines and the distant roar of the Pacific. I spent years there, a broken man, living off what little savings I had left, watching the world move on, watching Valerius Finch's empire expand. He rebranded Croft Son Engineering, absorbed it into his larger conglomerate, and used its stolen foundation to launch himself onto the national stage. Every article, every news report of his success was a fresh stab, a reminder of what he had taken. The vulnerability was crippling. I was a man without a purpose, without a name, without a future. I would spend days staring at the rain-streaked window, consumed by bitterness and regret. I was old, tired, and utterly defeated. But then, one evening, as the last rays of sunlight pierced through the dense canopy, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air of my desolate cabin. Something shifted. A spark, faint but undeniable, ignited in the ashes of my despair. I saw a news report on a flickering old television, showing Valerius Finch, older now, but still impeccably smooth, giving a keynote speech at some grand financial summit in New York. He was talking about vision, about ethics in business, about building a better future. My blood ran cold. Then hot. He was still using my foundation, my stolen legacy, to preach his hypocritical gospel. And I, Silas Croft, was rotting away in a forgotten corner of the world. It was then, in that moment of stark clarity, that the vulnerability began to recede, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. I was 67, an old man by many standards, but I wasn't dead, and I knew, with an absolute certainty that rattled me to my core, that I would not die a broken, forgotten man. Valerius Finch had ruined my name, but I would reclaim it, and to do that, I would have to trap the spider in his own web. The path ahead was unclear, a dense fog shrouded in impossible odds, but the destination, for me, was absolute. I was going to start small, learn new ways, and prepare for a war I never wanted. But now, I must win. The flickering news report faded, leaving the cabin in a deeper gloom. But the darkness outside no longer mirrored the one within me. That spark, it wasn't just a fleeting ember, it was a pilot light, steadily igniting a furnace of resolve. Valerius Finch, his name, once a brand of venom I couldn't spit out, now tasted like fuel. He thought he'd broken me, reduced Silas Croft to a cautionary tale, a ghost. But ghosts, I realized, could haunt, and sometimes, ghosts could become predators. 60-7. The number felt heavy, a reminder of time lost, opportunities squandered. My body wasn't what it once was. My hands, still capable of intricate work, now trembled occasionally. My eyes, though still sharp, needed reading glasses for the fine print. But my mind, honed by decades of solving complex engineering problems, was still a labyrinth of logic and deduction. And now, it had a singular, all-consuming purpose. The first step was the hardest, admitting I knew nothing, or rather, that I knew nothing relevant to this new kind of war. I was an analog man in a digital world. My cabin, a sanctuary of solitude, was also a cage, cut off from the very information I needed. I had to leave. Selling the cabin was out of the question. It was all I had left of a tangible home. But I did have one thing of value, a relic from a different life. My father's old pocket watch, a Patek Philippe, passed down through 3 generations of Crofts. I'd kept it polished, wound, a silent testament to the integrity Finch had tried to erase. It was a piece of my soul. But what good was a soul if the body it inhabited was rotting? I drove my old beat-up pickup truck, another survivor, back toward civilization. The watch heavy in my pocket. The pawn shop in Forks, a small town on the edge of the Olympic National Park, was exactly what I expected. Dim, dusty, smelling of forgotten dreams. The man behind the counter, a gruff fellow named Jocks with a patchy beard and a single gold tooth, examined the watch. He knew its worth, I could tell. He lowballed me, naturally, but not insultingly so. I haggled, not for the money, but for the principle. We settled on a price that felt like a fair compromise between my need and his greed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. My first purchase was a cheap laptop and a prepaid internet dongle from a big box store in Port Angeles. The brightly lit aisles, the sheer volume of choices, the constant buzz of music and chatter. It was an assault on my senses after years of quiet. I felt like a deep-sea diver surfacing after decades, blinking against the harsh light of a new world. Learning to use the laptop was a frustrating, humbling experience. The trackpad felt alien, the keyboard clunky beneath my calloused fingers. I'd built machines infinitely more complex, yet this simple device felt like an insurmountable barrier. But engineers, above all, are problem solvers. I started with the basics, YouTube tutorials. Hours upon agonizing hours of watching eager young faces explain how to navigate Windows 10 inches or understanding search engine queries. My pride screamed, but my resolve silenced it. I learned to type, slowly at first. Then with increasing speed, I learned to search, to filter, to discern reputable sources from the digital noise. The internet was a vast chaotic ocean, and Finch, I knew, swam in its deepest currents. I had to learn to navigate it. My initial research was simple. Valerius Finch. The results were overwhelming. He wasn't just a national figure anymore. He was a global titan. Finch Global Holdings, philanthropic endeavors, keynote speeches at Davos. A new acquisition almost every quarter. He owned energy companies, biotech startups, a major stake in a shipping conglomerate. His face, omnipresent in glossy online magazines, was older, the lines around his pale blue eyes a little deeper, but the unsettling stillness was still there, a permanent predator's calm. He had built an empire on the ruins of others, and Croft & Son was just one brick in his colossal edifice. This wasn't just about reclaiming my name, it was about exposing a systemic rot. My anger, once a hot wildfire, was now a cold, controlled burn, fueling every keystroke. Every late night spent hunched over the glowing screen in my dimly lit cabin. I began to look for patterns. I remembered the convoluted financial instruments, the aggressive leveraged buyouts that had crippled Croft & Son before Finch swooped in. I searched for other companies acquired by Finch Global Holdings. It wasn't hard to find dozens. I cross-referenced them with news articles, financial reports, looking for signs of distress before Finch's involvement. And there it was, a faint but discernible thread weaving through the tapestry of his acquisitions. Many of them had experienced sudden, unexplained financial difficulties, often preceded by strategic partnerships or optimizations, mirroring my own bitter experience. The scope of his operation was staggering. He wasn't just an opportunist. He was a master orchestrator of corporate collapse. He identified robust, niche companies, infiltrated them, destabilized them, then bought them for pennies on the dollar. It was a sophisticated, legal form of corporate predation, and he was doing it on an industrial scale. I realized I couldn't fight him directly, not with legal battles. He had the best lawyers, the deepest pockets, and the system was rigged in his favor. I needed to fight him on a different battlefield. I needed to understand his weaknesses, the pressure points of his vast, intricate network. And for that, I needed more than public information. My next step was to return to Seattle. I couldn't stay in the cabin if I wanted to be effective. The pawnshop money was dwindling, but I had another asset, my skills. I was an engineer, a master of precision. While I couldn't build rocket parts anymore, I could still fix things. I found a small apartment for rent in White Center, a diverse, unpretentious neighborhood south of downtown. It was cheap, grimy, and far from the gleaming towers of Finch Global, but it was a foothold. I started taking odd jobs, fixing machinery in small auto shops, repairing broken industrial equipment for mom-and-pop businesses. My hands still had their magic, and word spread quickly about the old man who could fix anything. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me fed and paid the rent. More importantly, it allowed me to observe, to listen. I immersed myself in the city's undercurrents, the whispers of the working class, the people who were often the first to feel the tremors of corporate machinations. One evening, while fixing a bulky conveyor belt in a small artisanal coffee bean roastery, I overheard a conversation. A young barista, Kaylin Reed, was complaining about her father's company. Finch Global is circling, Dad says. They've been sending in consultants, talking about synergies. Sounds like a death knell to me. Dad built that company for 30 years. Kellen's father, Corvin Reed, owned a specialized fabrication shop, one that made custom parts for high-end audio equipment. A niche, profitable business, just like Croft & Son. A cold dread, familiar and sharp, settled in my gut. Finch was still at it. This wasn't some isolated incident from my past. It was his modus operandi. Kellen's frustration, her fear, mirrored my own from years ago. Her father was about to walk into the same trap I had. This wasn't just a personal vendetta anymore. This was a chance to prevent another tragedy. But how? I was still a ghost, a pariah. Who would listen to Silas Croft, the erratic, senile old man who'd driven his own company into the ground? I needed to get closer, much closer, to Finch's current operations. I couldn't just warn Kellen's father. I needed proof, undeniable evidence of Finch's predatory methods. I needed to infiltrate, to see the gears of his machine turning from the inside. My engineering background, my meticulous attention to detail, my ability to understand complex systems, these were my weapons. I might be old, but I was also invisible. No one would suspect a broken-down old mechanic of plotting against a corporate titan. It was a powerful disguise. I spent weeks honing my plan, sketching out possible entry points, anticipating. I bought a cheap burner phone. I created a fake online profile, a nondescript individual with a patchy work history, specializing in industrial maintenance and equipment repair. I used an old, rarely used alias I'd once playfully used for a poker game decades ago, Alvin Thorne. It sounded plain, forgettable, perfect. The job application for a temporary maintenance technician at Reed Precision Fabrication, was accepted. My fabricated references, carefully constructed from old contacts who owed me favors and wouldn't ask too many questions, passed muster. I was in my first day at Reed Precision, as Alvin Thorne, felt like walking into a time warp. The hum of machinery, the smell of cutting oil, the focused intensity of craftsmen. It was all so familiar, so right. But beneath the surface, the tension Kalen had spoken of was palpable. The employees looked tired, stressed. Finch's consultants, easily identifiable by their expensive suits, an air of detached superiority, moved through the facility like sharks, circling, observing, dissecting. I kept my head down, doing my job, repairing a faulty lathe, calibrating a precision milling machine. My experience spoke for itself, earning me a quiet respect from the floor workers, while keeping me beneath the notice of Finch's team. I watched, I listened, I cataloged every detail. I learned the layout of the facility, the security protocols, the schedules. I observed the consultants, noting who they met with, what documents they carried, what conversations they had. The pattern was identical to Croft & Son. They were introducing new, complex financial reporting systems, pushing for aggressive production targets, demanding cuts in traditional supplier relationships. They were creating a web of manufactured inefficiencies and dependencies, designed to make Reed Precision appear less profitable, more vulnerable. One afternoon, I saw Finch himself. He walked through Reed Precision's facility, flanked by his usual retinue, his pale blue eyes sweeping over the machinery, the people, with that same unnerving stillness. He stopped to pat Corvin Reed on the shoulder, offering a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. Corvin looked utterly defeated, his shoulders slumped. That image solidified my resolve. Corvin Reed was looking at the same abyss I had faced, but this time, I was there. I was no longer the unsuspecting victim. I was the wolf in sheep's clothing, the engineer turned ghost, ready to dismantle the predator's trap from the inside. I knew Finch's consultants would be compiling their reports, their fabricated data to justify the eventual takeover. My target became clear: their digital files, their internal communications, their hidden agenda. I needed to get access to their network. It would be risky, expose me completely if I failed, but it was the only way to gather the proof I needed. That night, alone in my cramped apartment in White Center, the city lights a distant blur, I opened my laptop. My hands, still smelling faintly of cutting oil, moved with a newfound confidence over the keyboard. I wasn't just a mechanic or an old man anymore. I was a man on a mission, and tomorrow, I would begin the deepest infiltration, the most dangerous gamble, to slip into the digital shadows of Finch Global and find the lever to bring his empire crashing down. The hum of the fluorescent lights in my White Center apartment was a stark contrast to the buzzing machinery of Reed Precision, yet both sounds now served as a backdrop to my singular obsession. As Alvin Thorne, the quiet, capable maintenance man, I moved through Corvin Reed's fabrication shop, fixing, observing, and planning. My internal clock, once governed by sunrise and sunset in the quiet solitude of the Olympic Peninsula, was now synchronized with Finch Global's digital heartbeat. I wasn't just learning about computers. I was learning to think like the system I aimed to dismantle. My target was clear. The consultants Valerius Finch had embedded within Reed Precision. They were his eyes and ears, his hands on the levers of destruction. They were a trio. Kalen had mentioned their names: a perpetually smirking man named Thane Lockridge, a meticulously organized woman with severe glasses named Bryn Averill, and a younger, more nervous fellow named Callum Vance, who always looked like he was about to spill coffee on his pristine shirt. They operated out of a temporary office space carved out of an old storage room, a glass partition separating them from the main floor, a symbol of their detachment. I spent days mapping their habits. Lockridge was a creature of routine, always the first to arrive, always leaving his expensive laptop on his desk while he grabbed his morning espresso from Kellen's station. Averill was more careful, locking her machine, but she'd often leave a tablet charging on an open desk in the main work area when she went to the restroom. Vance, poor Vance, was the weakest link. He was constantly stressed, often forgetting to lock his screen, leaving his desk littered with half-eaten energy bars and open documents. My gut told me he was my entry point. My plan began with a hardware store run. I bought a cheap, inconspicuous USB flash drive, then spent hours back in my apartment, watching more tutorials. This wasn't about cracking complex encryption. It was about exploiting simple human error. I downloaded a small, open-source script designed to rapidly copy, designated file types from a drive without leaving a trace of execution on the host machine. It was crude, but effective. If I could get it loaded. I practiced inserting it, initiating the script, and removing it with speed and precision, timing myself with the Patek Philippe's ghost ticking in my mind. The biggest challenge wasn't the software, it was the physical act. I was a ghost, yes, but a visible one. I couldn't just wander into their office. I needed a reason, and a distraction. One afternoon, I observed Vance struggling with a minor issue on a smaller 3D printer in the corner of the fabrication shop, a relatively new addition that the consultants were pushing Corvin to invest more heavily in. He was trying to upload a new design file, but the machine kept freezing. The consultants, especially Lockridge, were often critical of any perceived technical hiccup, using it as leverage against Corvin. This was my chance. I waited until Lockridge and Averell had stepped out for a client lunch. Leaving Vance alone, frantically attempting to troubleshoot, I approached, my tools clinking softly. "Having some trouble there, son?" I asked, my voice raspy with years of disuse, perfectly fitting the Alvin Thorne persona. Vance jumped, startled. "Oh, Alvin, yeah. This damn printer. Lockridge needs these prototypes by end of day, and it's just stuck." He gestured helplessly at the flickering screen. I peered at it, feigning a thoughtful squint. Looks like a corrupted driver issue, or maybe a network conflict. Happens sometimes with these newer models trying to talk to older systems. Might need to clear the cache. Perhaps even a quick system restart. See if it re-establishes connection cleanly. I knew exactly what the problem was, having seen similar issues 100 times. It was simple, but for someone like Vance, whose expertise was in finance, not machinery, it was a black box. A system restart. Will that mess up the files? He fretted. No, just a clean slate for the operating system. But I'll need to go to your office, where the main network terminal is, to check the diagnostics from there. See if it's a local printer issue, or something upstream on the network affecting its communication. Bring your laptop. We can hook it up directly to the terminal. I kept my voice calm, reassuring, playing the experienced mechanic. Vance, desperate, nodded immediately. "Okay, yeah, great Alvin. Thanks." He grabbed his laptop, a sleek, expensive model, and followed me to the consultant's temporary office. The small room felt charged with a different kind of electricity now. I sat him down at his desk, pretending to examine the network port. "All right, let's see here. Just need to run a quick diagnostic. You mind just popping your laptop open, logging in, so I can check the network status?" I asked, gesturing vaguely at the back of his machine. Vance complied, typing in his password, eyes still anxious. As his screen came to life, I leaned over, ostensibly, to look at the network icon. But my other hand, swift and practiced, slid my USB drive into a port on the side of his laptop. It was a perfect, almost invisible motion, hidden by my body in his distraction. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat of adrenaline. "All right, that's better," I muttered, pretending to adjust a cable. The script on the USB drive, designed to be silent and fast, was doing its work. I could feel the heat of the drive, a sign of data transfer. Time was a luxury I didn't have. Lockridge and Avril could return at any moment. "See, the network connection looks solid from here," I continued, pointing at a random icon on his screen. "I bet it's just a localized printer driver hic. We'll try the old turn it off and on again trick on the printer itself. That usually clears up these kinds of issues." He looked at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Really, that simple?" "Sometimes, the simplest solutions are the best," I replied, a wry smile touching my lips. My hand, with an equal measure of speed and stealth, pulled the USB drive from the port. It was done. Less than 30 seconds. An eternity. "All right, let's head back to the printer," I said, standing up. Vance, relieved, followed me. I performed a perfunctory restart on the 3D printer, and sure enough, after a moment of sputtering, it came back online, humming smoothly. I'd fixed it for him before I'd even approached, just by observing the specific error code. My engineering mind had already diagnosed and mentally corrected the problem. "Alvin, you're a lifesaver," Vance exclaimed, genuinely grateful. "Thanks a million." "Just doing my job, son," I said, a wave of cold satisfaction washing over me. I had done my job, indeed. Back in my apartment that night, the cheap laptop felt like a treasure chest. I inserted the USB drive. The script had worked flawlessly. Folders upon folders of data appeared. Spreadsheets, internal memos, presentation decks, financial analyses. My hands trembled slightly as I navigated through the labyrinthine files, a sense of grim anticipation tightening my chest. What I found was horrifyingly familiar. The same patterns, but magnified. Projected revenue losses, artificially inflated expenses, pessimistic market analyses, all designed to paint Reed Precision as a failing venture, ripe for a takeover. But there was more. I found a file named **** Project Chimera, Phase 2 targets. ***, my blood ran cold. Opening it, I saw a list. Not just Reed Precision, but nearly 24 other small to medium-sized manufacturing and tech companies across the Pacific Northwest, each with their own strategic optimization plans outlined. These weren't just random targets. They were specialized, profitable niche businesses, just like Croft Son had been. Each entry detailed projected timeline for destabilization, valuation adjustment, a euphemism for price dropping, and acquisition. It was a methodical, industrial-scale predation. My eyes scanned the list, picking out names. Evergreen Robotics, a groundbreaking startup building autonomous drones for environmental monitoring. Cascade Biodevices, a company developing revolutionary portable medical diagnostic equipment. Olympus Foundry, a metalworks known for its artisanal, custom architectural components. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were people's livelihoods, their dreams, their legacies. Finch wasn't just destroying my past. He was devouring the future of an entire region. A new surge of anger, cold and precise, coursed through me. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was a war against a hydra, and I had just glimpsed its many heads. But the most unsettling discovery was buried deeper, in an encrypted subfolder within Vance's personal files. Something the automated script had still managed to snag. It was labeled **** personal Finchcom. ***, my technical skills weren't advanced enough to crack the encryption yet, but the very existence of a personal communication folder, from Vance specifically about Finch, kept separate from the official company communications, spoke volumes. It suggested a level of secrecy, perhaps even coercion. Vance, despite his nervousness, was clearly more involved than I initially thought. Or perhaps he was a victim in his own right, caught in Finch's web. I spent the next few nights hunched over my laptop, analyzing the unencrypted data, cross-referencing names and dates with public records. The consultants were subtly altering financial reports, shifting assets, creating shell companies to funnel funds, all perfectly legal on paper, but designed to systematically drain Reed Precision's vitality. They were making the company appear to be failing, creating a narrative that would justify Finch's rescue. Corvin Reed was being bled dry, and he didn't even know it. I saw Corvin in the factory, his face etched with worry lines, trying to keep spirits up. Kaylin, his daughter, worked tirelessly, her cheerful demeanor slowly eroding under the relentless pressure. She'd often come over to my workstation, asking for advice on a tricky piece of equipment, or just to chat. "Dad's really stressed. Alvin," she confided one afternoon, wiping grease from her hands. "These Finch guys keep pushing him to cut corners, use cheaper materials. Says it's cost optimization. But we pride ourselves on quality. You know, our clients expect it. If we compromise that, we lose everything." I nodded, my gaze fixed on a milling machine. They don't understand the value of a good name. Some people only see numbers, not the heart of a business. It was all I could say without revealing myself. It killed me to stand by, but I couldn't risk my cover yet. I needed more. I needed the smoking gun, not just the circumstantial evidence. The personal Finchcom folder haunted me. My focus shifted. I needed to crack that encrypted folder. It was a different league of digital warfare, far beyond simple file copying. I started searching for open-source decryption tools, tutorials on cryptography, even dark web forums, a dangerous game, but one I was now willing to play. My days were spent as Alvin Thorne, fixing machines, my nights as Silas Croft, a student of digital espionage. The learning curve was steep. My mind, used to the tangible logic of gears and circuits, struggled with the abstract complexities of algorithms and encryption. But every failed attempt, every frustrating dead end, only fueled my resolve. This was an engineering problem, just a different kind. I systematically broke it down, byte by byte, concept by concept. One evening, after nearly a week of relentless effort, combining a brute force attack with a dictionary search, I hit pay. The encryption on Vance's personal Finchcom folder finally yielded. My breath caught in my throat. Inside, it wasn't just communications. It was a series of encrypted video logs, recorded by Callum Vance himself. The first one opened, and Vance's anxious face filled my screen. his eyes darting nervously. Log entry, October 14th, he whispered, clearly terrified. Lockridge just confirmed phase 2 for read precision. I don't like this. It's too aggressive. And the projections, they're manipulating the data. I saw Averell doing it. She's adding ghost inventory to the books, inflating supplier costs, then funneling the difference through offshore accounts linked to a shell corp called Aegis Solutions. It's not just hostile takeover. It's fraud. Large scale. My jaw clenched. Aegis Solutions. I recognized the name. It had popped up occasionally in my earlier research. A minor entity linked to Finch Global, but I dismissed it as another subsidiary. Now, it was a funnel for illicit funds. Vance continued, his voice trembling. They're doing it to all the Phase 2 targets. Project Chimera. It's a systematic looting operation. Finch isn't just buying companies. He's bleeding them dry, then discarding them, or selling off their core assets, while using the shell corporations to hide the true profits and losses. He told me if I didn't comply, my family would pay. My sister's medical bills. He knows everything. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Finch wasn't just a corporate predator. He was a blackmailer, a thief, using people's vulnerabilities against them. Callum Vance was a victim, just like me, just like Corvin Reed, and the scale of the operation was truly staggering. Project Chimera wasn't about acquisitions. It was about asset stripping, financial fraud, and a network of coercion that spanned far wider than I could have imagined. Finch was a spider, yes, but he had an army of unwilling flies caught in his web. I scrolled through more of Vance's video logs. They painted a picture of a man crumbling under immense pressure, documenting every detail, every instruction, every horrifying manipulation, in a desperate attempt to create a lifeline for himself, should he ever be caught. He was gathering evidence against Finch, even as he was forced to participate in the scheme. In a later log, Vance spoke of a central server, a secure, off-site repository where all the aggregated data for Project Chimera was stored. He mentioned a name, whispered it like a prayer. Asterisk, asterisk, the black box. Asterisk, asterisk, and he spoke of a single, unique keycard, held by Valerius Finch himself, that granted physical access to the server room, and a master digital key that accessed the encrypted data within DOT. My mind raced. This was it. This was the true core of Finch's empire. Not the sleek offices, not the public facade, but this black box, hidden away, holding the secrets of his colossal fraud. But then, Vance's last log entry played. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. They're moving up the timeline for read precision. Lockridge said Finch wants it done by the end of the month. And he's been asking questions. About my family. He knows I've been keeping records, I think. I think he suspects. I need to get out. I need to get this to someone. The video cut abruptly, a sudden, jarring termination. My blood ran cold. He suspects. Had Finch found out about Vance's secret logs? Was Vance in danger? More importantly, was I in danger? I had accessed his laptop, downloaded his files. If Finch knew about Vance's records, he would soon connect the dots. My cover as Alvin Thorne was paper-thin. I looked at the glowing screen, the anxious face of Callum Vance, frozen in fear. The scale of Finch's power, his willingness to crush anyone who stood in his way, was terrifyingly clear. But so was the path forward. The black box. That was the key. I had the proof of the scheme, the names of the other victims, the shell corporations. But to truly bring Finch down, I needed what was in that black box. I needed the master key, the aggregated data, the undeniable proof of his global fraud. And to get it, I would have to go after Finch himself. My phone, the cheap burner, vibrated. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A cold, synthesized voice spoke. Silas Croft, we know you're back, and we know what you're looking for. Disappear, old man, or you'll find yourself 6 feet under, just like your company. The line went dead. My hand, still holding the phone, trembled, not from fear, but from a new, incandescent fury. Finch knew. He knew I was back, and he was warning me. But the warning was too late. I was no longer a broken man. I was a ghost, yes, but a ghost, now armed with knowledge, a phantom with a singular, burning purpose. He thought he could scare me away. He had no idea what he had unleashed. I had seen the darkness in the black box, and I knew I had to expose it, no matter the cost. The game had just become deadly personal, and I was all in. The synthesized voice on the phone had been a ghost in my ear, a digital phantom echoing Finch's malice. Silas Croft, we know you're back, and we know what you're looking for. Disappear, old man. or you'll find yourself 6 feet under, just like your company. The silence that followed was heavy, not with fear, but with the cold, precise weight of absolute certainty. He knew. My cover, as Alvin Thorne, the unassuming mechanic, was compromised. Vance's logs, my infiltration of read precision, it had all been discovered. The game was no longer a quiet hunt in the shadows. It was a declared war, and I, an old man against an empire, had just been dared to make my next move. The warning was a mistake. Finch had tried to intimidate me, to send me scurrying back to my cabin in the wilderness. But he didn't understand. The Silas Croft he had broken was gone. The man who picked up that phone was a different creature entirely. Forged in the fires of loss, and tempered by years of solitary rage, I had nothing left to lose, and that made me the most dangerous kind of adversary. My immediate concern was Callum Vance. If Finch suspected him, Vance was in grave danger. I tried to call the number from his laptop files, the one he'd used for those encrypted video logs. It went straight to voicemail. I left a coded message, something about a faulty circuit needing recalibration, hoping that if he was still alive and monitoring, he'd understand it was a warning. I never heard back. My gut clenched. Finch didn't leave loose ends. Vance was likely gone. Silenced. Another casualty in Finch's relentless war on decency. That thought solidified my resolve. I wouldn't just expose Finch. I would annihilate him. The first step was to find the black box. Vance's logs were vague on its exact location, only describing it as a secure, off-site repository and mentioning it was in the metropolitan area. Finch, for all his global reach, preferred to keep his most sensitive secrets close. I cross-referenced the names of Finch's shell corporations from Vance's files: Aegis Solutions, Cerberus Holdings, Atlas Ventures with property records in Seattle and its affluent suburbs, Redmond, Kirkland. Finch was meticulous about obscuring ownership, but a paper trail, however convoluted, always existed. It took days of relentless digital digging, late nights fueled by stale coffee, and a burning need for answers. I sifted through shell companies, offshore registrations, and layers of corporate obfuscation. Finally, a pattern emerged. Several of the shell corporations, including Aegis Solutions, were linked to a seemingly innocuous address, a nondescript data storage facility in a quiet industrial park in Redmond, Washington. The facility itself was called *** Fortress Data Solutions. ***, its online presence was minimal. Its security features boasted as military-grade, no identifying signage beyond a small, silver plaque. Perfect for hiding a black box. I drove my old pickup truck to Redmond, parking a few blocks away and approaching Fortress Data Solutions on foot, adopting the slow, meandering gait of an old man out for a walk. From a distance, the building was a sleek, windowless monolith of reinforced concrete and dark glass, surrounded by high fences, topped with razor wire. There were cameras everywhere, visible and hidden, and patrols of uniformed security guards. A single, heavily fortified entrance. Getting in would be a nightmare. But my engineer's mind saw it as a problem to be solved. A challenge of systems and vulnerabilities. I spent hours observing, sketching out camera angles, guard rotations, entry points, the air conditioning vents, the underground utility tunnels, the loading dock schedules. Nothing escaped my notice. I even noticed the subtle hum of a high-power generator, indicating the sheer amount of computing power housed within. Finch wasn't just storing data. He was running something substantial. The crucial piece, however, was still Finch's personal key. Vance's logs had made it clear: no keycard, no physical access to the server room where the black box resided, and without Finch's master digital key, the data itself remained encrypted. I needed to get close to Valerius Finch. Finch, the public figure, was surprisingly easy to track. He was hosting a major charity gala at the prestigious Arctic Club Hotel in downtown Seattle the following week, a fundraiser for a new entrepreneurial mentorship program. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. It was an exclusive, high-security event, but also a public one. Finch would be there, mingling, charming, accepting accolades. It was my best, perhaps only, chance. My resources were the money from my father's watch was gone, spent on the laptop, the burner phone, the basic living expenses. I still had my skills, my old tools, and an unwavering focus. I started preparing, not for a fight, but for an intrusion. I fashioned a set of custom lock-picking tools from piano wire and old dental picks, honing them to a jeweler's precision. I bought a small, high-density flash drive, preloaded with the decryption algorithms I'd painstakingly researched. along with a secure data transfer program designed to bypass most network firewalls. I practiced a sleight of hand, using a small, discarded circuit board as a mock keycard, perfecting the subtle flick of the wrist, the misdirection of a glance. The night of the gala, Seattle was bathed in a soft, autumnal drizzle, the kind that reflects the neon glow of the city into shimmering ribbons. I wore the only suit I still owned, an old ill-fitting garment that smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs. I looked like a ghost from a bygone era, an anonymous old man, out of place. Perfect. Gaining entry to the Arctic Club wasn't about a ticket. It was about appearance and confidence. I stood near the velvet rope, watching the stream of limousines and luxury cars disgorge Seattle's elite. I caught sight of Finch, stepping out of a black Mercedes, his silver hair immaculate, his pale blue eyes scanning the crowd with that familiar, unsettling stillness. He was flanked by 2 burly bodyguards. I waited for a moment of distraction. A famous local politician arrived, drawing a flurry of photographers and reporters. As the red carpet churned with activity, I walked purposefully towards the entrance, my head held high, a look of mild annoyance on my face, as if I had merely forgotten my invitation inside. One of Finch's bodyguards, distracted by the commotion, glanced at me dismissively. "Excuse me, sir," I said, my voice low and weary. I seemed to have misplaced my pass. I fumbled in my inner pocket, making a show of searching. "My wife is already inside. She'll be worried." The bodyguard, already stressed, simply waved me through, eager to clear the bottleneck. My invisibility was my greatest asset. Inside, the Arctic Club's grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the hum of polite conversation. Waiters in white gloves moved through the throng, offering champagne. I moved like a shadow, keeping to the periphery, my eyes fixed on Finch. He was holding court near a large ice sculpture, his face beaming with practiced charm as he shook hands. Accepting accolades, I needed to get the keycard without him noticing. I couldn't just pick his pocket. His bodyguards were too close. I needed a closer approach, a reason to be near him. My opportunity came when Finch moved towards a quieter corner, engaging in a brief, hushed conversation with Thane Lockridge, the smirking consultant from Reed Precision. Lockridge looked uncomfortable, his usual swagger replaced by a nervous deference. This was my moment. I pretended to stumble, my old joints giving out, sending a small, ornate serving tray I'd accidentally picked up clattering to the floor near Finch's feet. Champagne flutes shattered. A gasp went through the small group. "Oh, my apologies, sir. My deepest apologies," I exclaimed, playing the part of the frail, clumsy old man. I bent down ostensibly to help clean up the broken glass, but my real target was Finch's left jacket pocket, as he instinctively looked down at the mess. His bodyguards tensed, but their focus was on the broken glass. The potential danger. My hand, quick as a viper, brushed against his pocket, feeling the subtle outline of a plastic card. With a practiced flick, it was in my palm. My other hand, still trembling from the manufactured fall, scooped up a few shards of glass, making it look like I was genuinely helping. "Are you all right, old man?" Finch asked, his voice laced with annoyance, but also a hint of concern, playing to his public persona. Yes, quite all right, Mr. Finch. Just a bit clumsy in my old age," I replied, forcing a weak smile. I straightened up, making eye contact for a split second. His pale blue eyes were still and cold, but they held no recognition. I was just another minor inconvenience. I retreated quickly, melting back into the crowd, the stolen keycard burning like ice in my pocket. The adrenaline coursed through me, a raw, exhilarating rush. I had done it. Leaving the gala, I immediately drove to Fortress Data Solutions in Redmond. It was past midnight. The industrial park quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic on I-405. The security guards were still on patrol, their flashlights cutting swaths through the darkness. I parked my truck a few blocks away, changing into dark clothes I'd stashed in the back, mechanic's overalls, stained with grease, a baseball cap pulled low. I looked like a disgruntled night shift worker, a ghost barely registered by the world. My observations from earlier paid off. I knew the patrol patterns, the blind spots in the camera coverage. I scaled the razor wire fence at its lowest point, using a thick full blanket and my work gloves to avoid injury. My muscles protesting, but my resolve unwavering. My body wasn't young, but it still knew how to move with purpose. Once inside the perimeter, I moved low, hugging the shadows. I found a rarely used service entrance, tucked away behind a loading dock, its steel door secured with a high-security electronic lock and a heavy bolt. The lockpicking was tedious, requiring absolute silence and a delicate touch. Minutes stretched into an eternity, my breath fogging in the cool night air. Finally, with a soft click, the pins aligned. I slid the bolt back, and the door opened with a faint squeal. Inside, the air was cold, dry, and sterile. A maze of corridors, illuminated by emergency lighting, stretched before me. I moved with the silent certainty of a predator, following the architectural plans I had pieced together from my online research. The server room, the black box chamber, was deep within the facility, protected by multiple layers of security. I encountered another electronic lock, more complex than the last, but this one had a keycard reader. My heart pounded as I slid Finch's card into the slot. A soft green light flashed. The door hissed open. The room was vast, filled with rows upon rows of glowing servers, their fans humming a low, powerful drone. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and electricity. In the very center, isolated within its own glass-walled, climate-controlled enclosure, was the black box. It wasn't a box at all, but a single, massive, custom-built server rack, a fortress of data, its indicator lights blinking like silent, watchful eyes. Accessing it required another keycard swipe on a smaller panel, and then a digital key. Finch's keycard, I knew from Vance's frantic logs, contained embedded biometric data and a unique digital identifier that served as the master key. This wasn't just physical access, it was the digital password. I slid the card in. The screen on the black box flickered, prompting for a retinal scan. My blood ran cold. Finch had accounted for physical theft. My stolen keycard was useless without his eyes. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. All this, for nothing. The risk, the years of planning, the humiliation, the danger. Was it all for a dead end? Then, a flicker of an idea. Vance's logs. He had spoken of Finch's paranoia, his need to centralize everything, but also his shortcuts. He hated waiting. I remembered a specific detail. Finch had complained about the tedious biometrics for remote access, and Vance had mentioned a temporary workaround he'd implemented. A backdoor override for Finch's personal tablet, used only in emergencies. Could it be linked? I fumbled with my own ancient smartphone, connecting it to the black box's maintenance port. I uploaded the custom script I'd prepared, a combination of a network scanner and a forensic data extractor. It was a long shot. The black box was an isolated system, but if there was any digital footprint of that backdoor override, my script might find it. Minutes crawled by. The hum of the servers was deafening. My eyes darted to the door, imagining guards bursting in. Then, a beep. My phone screen flashed. A series of alphanumeric characters. A hidden access code for the retinal scanner, extracted from a buried temporary log file. Finch's impatience had been his undoing. I quickly typed the code into the black box's interface. The retinal scanner glowed green. The screen changed, displaying a vast, intricate network of files. Project Chimera, Aegis Solutions, dozens of shell corporations, financial reports, manipulated balance sheets, covert agreements, blackmail evidence, secret offshore accounts. It was all there, laid bare. The entire, colossal fraud. I plunged in my flash drive, initiating the download. The data streamed in, gigabytes upon gigabytes of incriminating evidence. It was slow, agonizingly slow. I heard a faint noise from the corridor outside, a distant clang. My heart leaped into my throat. They were coming. I ripped the flash drive out. The transfer only 70% complete, but it was enough. More than enough. With a final, furious gesture, I typed a short command into the black box's terminal. A self-destruct sequence designed to corrupt its own internal directory and wipe key files, rendering Finch's core data useless. An engineer's parting gift. I slipped out of the server room, retraced my steps, the adrenaline pushing me past the pain in my aching joints. I bypassed the service door, scaling the fence again, landing on the other side with a jarring thud. My body screamed in protest, but I ignored it. I was a ghost, and ghosts felt no pain. Back in my truck, I sped away, blending into the early morning traffic. The flash drive was heavy in my hand, heavier than any gold. It was the weight of justice. The next morning, I was back in my white center apartment, the city's muted buzz a distant backdrop. I connected the flash drive to my laptop. The downloaded data was overwhelming. It was a digital map of Finch's entire empire of deceit. I didn't want to just leak it. I wanted a targeted strike. Finch had built his empire on the belief that he was untouchable, protected by layers of legality and influence. I needed to dismantle that belief. Publicly and irrevocably. I knew a man. a retired investigative journalist named Valerius Thorne, who had once tried to expose Finch during his rise, but had been shut down by legal threats and a powerful PR machine. Valerius was a man of integrity, driven by a deep sense of justice. He was also a ghost, cast out of mainstream media for his relentless pursuit of truth. I found his contact information through an old Engineering Society newsletter. He lived quietly in a small town outside Portland, Oregon. I drove down the I-5, the flash drive secured in my pocket. Valerius was wary when I arrived at his unassuming home, his eyes sharp and suspicious. He recognized my name, the erratic old man from the news. But as I laid out the data, the manipulated financials, the shell corporations, the video logs of Callum Vance, his skepticism slowly eroded, replaced by a grim determination. He spent days verifying, cross-referencing, bringing in trusted, anonymous contacts. The evidence was irrefutable. The scale of Finch's fraud, the extent of Project Chimera, the blackmail, the asset stripping, it was all there, meticulously documented by Vance, and confirmed by the Black Box data. Valerius, with my anonymous assistance, released the story, not to a major news outlet, but through a network of independent investigative journalists and online platforms, the kind that couldn't be bought or bullied. The story exploded. Finch Global, an empire built on fraud and predation, screamed the headlines across the internet. Project Chimera: How Valerius Finch looted dozens of American companies. The world watched as Finch Global Holdings plunged into chaos. Stock prices plummeted. Regulators launched immediate investigations. The FBI, armed with the evidence Elias provided, moved swiftly. Arrests were made. Thane Lockridge, Bryn Averill, and dozens of other executives implicated in the scheme. They had been so confident, so untouchable. Valerius Finch, caught completely off guard, tried to deny everything, to launch another smear campaign. But this time, the evidence was too overwhelming, too public. The video logs of Callum Vance, revealing Finch's threats and coercion, turned public opinion irrevocably against him. Finch, the charming visionary, was exposed as a ruthless, calculating criminal. The final image I saw of Valerius Finch was on a grainy television screen in a small diner in Vancouver, Washington. He was being led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit disheveled, his face pale and contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief. His pale blue eyes, once so still and predatory, now darted around wildly, finally showing fear. He was no longer the master of his domain. He was just a man, stripped of his power, his empire crumbling around him. The satisfaction was a deep, resonant hum in my bones. He was destroyed. But the revenge, profound as it was, left a chilling residue. The old Silas Croft, the engineer who believed in integrity and community, was gone. In his place stood a man hardened by years of bitterness, a phantom who had learned to navigate the shadows, to deceive, to steal, to infiltrate. I had become the ghost I had sought to be, invisible, untraceable. I had dismantled an empire, but I had also irrevocably altered myself in the process. I called Corvin Reed, anonymously, telling him where to find the evidence that would save his company. And Callan's, I later learned, Reed Precision Fabrication, not only survived but thrived, becoming a beacon of ethical manufacturing. And perhaps, somewhere, Callum Vance had found a path to freedom, or at least, peace. My journey had ended. Finch was gone. My name, Silas Croft, was vindicated, whispered not as a cautionary tale, but as a silent, avenging force. But the quiet hum of the server fans, the adrenaline of the heist, the cold certainty of my new skills, they lingered. The world I had once known, of honest work and simple virtues, felt impossibly far away. I had walked through the fire, and while I had emerged victorious, I was also forever changed, a shadow walking among the living, carrying the weight of what I had become. I drove west, towards the Pacific, towards the wild, untamed coastline of the Olympic Peninsula. The cabin was gone, sold years ago. But the endless forest, the roaring ocean, they still beckoned. Perhaps, among the whispering pines and the crashing waves, a ghost could finally find a measure of quiet. The end.